What's going on, guys? It's Greg here, aka NYPrepper, and I have special guest Alaskan Ballistics Chuck. Some of you guys might have seen him before. I'm sure you have. Very well known in the gun tubing community. And we're going to talk about AR-15 versus AR-10 for SHTF. What are the pros and cons of each one? He has more AR-15s than I do. He's got more experience with them. I don't know if I have more AR-10s than he does, but I've shot a lot of AR-10s. So that's definitely a strong point for me. So we're going to debate the pros and cons, and then we'll let you guys decide which one is right for you. So without further delay, we're going to get into it. All right, so I'm going to start with the pros for the AR-10, and I'm going to say that one of the biggest advantages is you're going to have more energy, substantially more energy in general. You know, if you have like a 308 or 6.5 Creedmoor, you're going to have muzzle energies that easily exceed 2,000 foot-pounds. Sometimes even you can get up to 3,000 foot-pounds. And then if you're talking about some of the more exotic AR-10s that are chambered in 300 Win Mag or even 338 Lapua, which are kind of the more specialty ones, you can get up to 5,000 foot-pounds if that matters to you. So more energy, there's a lot of advantages to that. I mean, we could spend the whole separate video just talking about the pros and cons of energy.
Sure.
Do you need it? You know, why, and blah, blah, blah. But if that's something important to you, energy, a lot more energy, 2 to 3 times as much energy, depending on, you know, the cartridges. What do you think about that?
Yeah. So, while it is very true that the AR-10 cartridges get 2 to 3 times as much energy, for example, my AR-10 18-inch 6.5 Creedmoor, which I got right here. So we got it right here, guys. All right. Which I love. It gets, about 2,200 foot-pounds of energy out of it, whereas a 308 with the same 18-inch barrel might get 2,400 foot-pounds of energy. And I mean, you can just look at the difference in the ammo. If you didn't know, this is 6.5 Creedmoor on the bottom and 5.56 on the top. What people don't tell you is, okay, for SHTF, Greg might have stocked up with M80 ball rounds, and I've stocked up with expandable rounds in my 5.56. So his M80 ball is going to go right through somebody and probably knock them down, but probably only deposit 50% of that energy. Maybe 60, maybe 70, who knows? All right, I don't know. There's a great physics way to figure it out, but well, if my little Barnes hollow point here, 62 grain in my 5.56, and this is a 5.56 loaded Barnes hollow point, if it opens up inside somebody and expands, it dumps 100% of its energy. It's equal to the energy that you just had, and I've got more rounds in the magazine. So we'll talk about that later. But yeah, so the energy is definitely there. Like the energy is definitely there. And if you need to reach out and touch somebody, that kind of thing, long range, like you'll talk about later, like the AR-10 platform is definitely better. But it doesn't mean that the energy is insufficient with properly loaded 5.56.
Right. That's true. So yeah, you can get the same amount of tissue damage with lighter bullets as long as they're expanding bullets, obviously,
and constructed where they stay together and expand. And that's one thing is a lot of the 5.56 rounds are loaded with VMAX, and that one won't stay together very well. Like you'd want something with Barnes or Nosler Accubon or the Hornady GMX CX line, new CX line. So you'd want something with those, and that's pretty. Those are expensive rounds too. They're not cheap.
Right. And another pro for the AR-10 is going to be, in general, it's more versatile. So you can use it for hunting and home defense, especially hunting large game. You have bigger bullets, more energy, more retained energy at long distances. So for big game hunting and home defense and some other things that I'm going to touch on later, in general, I would say it's more versatile for a variety of situations in an SHTF situation.
And while I agree with that, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt there. While I agree with that, I definitely think that so if it's more versatile, you're going to have some problems that people don't think about. My 62 grain AR-15 is sighted in at 100 yards, and I know the drop and everything. And I can put in 62 grain military bullets, and they shoot very similar. I've actually done the testing for myself at the range, seen where they point at impact with every AR-15 that I have, and I know I'm going to be minute a man out to 300 yards or 400 yards without changing sights. But
Right.
if you want to do home defense with the 308, you're going to have to look at small, fast bullets that aren't going to overpenetrate walls and stuff like that. So if you have your kids in the other room, like I do, I got young kids in the other room, and I throw in a 308 or I throw in my 6.5 Creedmoor, I'm going to have to look at 100 grain 6.5 Creedmoor, 90 grain VMAX. Otherwise, that 6.5 Creedmoor is going right through a bad guy and right out the back guy, unless he's wearing body armor, significant rifle rated body armor. Unless he's wearing that, like it's going right in and out, and then it could go to my kid's room and still be a very deadly bullet. Whereas the 5.56 would stop in there, and I don't have to change zeros. So
Right.
if you are with the AR-10 in a SHTF scenario, and you got it loaded up with M80 ball going on patrol, or even 150 grain soft points, all right, then you got to go to your house, and it's somebody's breaking into your house, and it's home defense situation with your kids and wife in there. Now you got to throw in 125 grain Nosler Accubons, or
Right. Lighter
110
stuff.
grain 308 Barnes, or 110 grain VMAX. You got to throw a lighter bullet in there so that it doesn't penetrate all the way through. It's going to deposit a lot of energy in 308, and those are specialty rounds that are mostly hand loaded. Most people can't find a lot of, like, the 120 grain 5 grain Accubon I did a video on today, as a matter of fact. Like, that's a hand load. You're going to have to hand load it. You're not going to find it on the shelf. And so finding good defensive hand loads, or excuse me, good defensive factory rounds for 308 is going to be difficult, because you're going to have to use the 110 grain VMAX or the 110 grain Barnes, um, something that's not going to penetrate so deeply that it goes through every wall in your house. And that's the thing about those big heavy bullets. So is it more
Yeah.
versatile? Yes, it's more versatile at hunting different types of game. Is it more versatile for home defense? That one I'll have to debate you on, because I don't have to change point of impact when I go from 62 grain Barnes to 62 grain uh, uh, you know 62 grain military bullets. There's a slight impact shift, don't get me wrong, but
Right.
I know where it's at. I've done the testing. I know it's on all of my rifles. It's an inch to inch and a half up to the right, and up and right, going from the
Right.
62 grain Barnes going to PMC green tips. So I'm still going to be minute a man no matter what I'm using out to 300 yards, right? Or even 400 yards. But in 308, there's such a big difference in grains and weights for what you would use for home defense versus what you would use for hunting versus what you would use for, like, SHTF M80 ball stopping vehicles and stuff like that. So
Right.
I
It's
would
it's
say
definitely overkill for home defense for sure.
yeah. So I would say it's more versatile for hunting and stopping vehicles and damaging
Things.
engine blocks and things that need to be damaged, that are coming at you in a in a grid down situation or SHTF situation, whatever we want to call it. But I definitely think that for home defense, it's overkill to the point where you're going to have a point of impact shift between 110 and 120 grains.
Right. I will add to that it's not just going to penetrate through a few walls. I've actually done a plywood test with M80 ball,
I remember
and
that
with
video.
you saw it.
Yeah.
It went through like 40 sheets of plywood with a 16-inch barrel. I mean, that's ridiculous, you know?
Yeah, it'd probably go through less with a longer barrel, because the more speed would start to rip off the jacket
That's
eventually.
true. Yeah,
Um,
that's true.
eventually. So, like, a 24-inch bolt gun in 308 would probably go through 36 of them instead of 40. But I
Still, you're
digress. Yeah, it's
you're
the
looking
same.
at several houses potentially.
Yeah, and then obviously you use an expanding bullet for home defense in that category, but
Right,
these are
right,
my 127 grain LR Rex. I've shot a caribou with these gun. These are a hunting bullet. They're going to stay solid and keep their and expand the front. The back of it's going to stay solid. It's still going to go through sheetrock walls. It would still go through every sheetrock wall in my house right now,
oh, easily, yeah,
and into my neighbors. Like, so, whereas this Barnes is designed more to be open up, and it's a TSX, and it
right,
might go through too. I need to get TTSX for this. it might go through too, but it's not going to be as bad. It's a smaller bullet, so it's going to lose its velocity more for home defense.
Yeah, I think those are valid points. Another big advantage, I would say, in my opinion, is you're generally going to get better ballistics coefficients with AR-10 rifles. 308, 6.5 Creedmoor especially, but even 308, you can easily clear, zero point 0.4, even get up to 0.5. Like M80 ball is at 0.4, and M80 ball is not even, like a
No.
match bullet, or it's kind of middle of the road as far as like weight and BC. So you can get heavier bullets, even 180s, and you can get good BCs there. And then 6.5 Creedmoor especially. So if we're talking about SHTF, depending on your terrain, that might be something you want to consider if you live in farm country. There's a lot of open terrain, or you're out west. You may not that you most likely will be engaged in long distance, self defense situations. A lot of people think like, oh, I'll never have to shoot beyond 100 yards,
And
but
that's not
really,
true. I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's not true
yeah,
even in their neighborhood. Because if you're in a suburban neighborhood in Atlanta, that's where I grew up. If you
right,
range find down the street, that
it's a
house
couple
is three
hundred
or four
yards.
hundred yards away. Yeah, it's like people.
It looks close, but
Yeah,
then when
you're
you
used
actually
to it.
range it, yeah,
Yeah,
you'd be
in the
surprised.
woods, yeah, you're in Georgia. You're not going to have more than 25-yard shots.
Right.
Biggest buck I ever killed was 35 yards away with open sights. Um, but in the eastern portion of the United States, yeah, you can still have long shots. Farm country and all that kind of stuff.
Especially. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's something to consider. Higher BCs, what are your thoughts about that?
So yeah, absolutely the higher BCs, especially in 6.5 Creedmoor, even 308 with some of the higher match grade bullets. Um, you do forget that there are multiple calibers for the AR-15 platform that can also achieve those high BCs. So like 6.5 Grendel and 6.8 SBC2 have pretty good high BCs. There's been some new 25 caliber development bullets. So the 25-45 sharps, which I think is probably the best AR-15 cartridge made to replace the 5.56 is the 25-45 sharps, but most people haven't heard of it. But I think it's a very good one. And so those cartridges can get the BCs, and you can do specialty things like hand loading, like I was just telling you right there. Maybe it's still up on my phone here, but I was just showing you the 77 grain. Um, yeah, the 77 grain Barnes LRX, it's got a BC of 0.404, so it's getting right up there with 308. You
Yep.
know, 6.5 Creedmoor can have BCs up in the sixes, so there's no way we're going to compete with that, and you would need a specialty barrel and sometimes a specialty chamber in the AR-10 to get that, excuse me, in the AR-15 to get that in 5.56. And I don't think, that'd be a hand loading only bullet, the 77 grain LRX, for example, in 5.56. There's not going to be a factory load, I don't think. And that bullet I really got for 22,250 anyway. So while I think it's a valid point, there are some high BC bullets in 5.56 that shouldn't be ignored. Berger has some that are in the 0.369 range, which is still, a whole
That's still
tenth
good.
better than the 0.25s that the VMAX is in, for example. So
Right.
yeah,
So that's very interesting information there. I never heard about that 25-45 sharps, you said?
yeah, I think, and that goes in. It's a 80 to 87 grain bullet, and they do have a 101 grain, which means you can load the LRX in it now for the 101 grain 25 caliber. I think it's
Okay.
101. It might be 107. I could be wrong. They have some 87 grain, and a 20-inch barrel. It's supposed to get 3,000 feet per second.
That's good.
Um, yeah, which is better than 6 arc, because 6 arc really needs the 22-inch barrel to get the ballistics in a semi-automatic gun. It's got
Hmm.
to have that 22-inch barrel minimum, possibly 24. And everybody's getting a 6 arc and getting put an 18-inch barrel on it and wondering why they're not getting the velocity. Well, yeah, the velocity states in the Hornady reloading manual. Get a 22-inch barrel. So, um, but even the 6 millimeter arc has some really good ballistic coefficients as well. So I wouldn't say they're up there at the speeds you would send a 6.5 Creedmoor, but they definitely are up there.
It's good information. So just, expanding on that, generally speaking, you're going to have a greater maximum effective range. If we're talking about like a classic AR-15 in 5.56 versus a classic AR-10 in 308, those are the foundational designs.
Hmm.
308, you're going to be able to reach out to 1,000. I mean, I've taken it out to 1,000, no
Oh, yeah.
problem.
Me too.
You're gonna have serious drop, but you can adjust for that. You're probably gonna have like 25 MOA drop. Um, you're still gonna retain a good amount of energy, even with a 308. We're not even talking 6.5 Creedmoor. Even a 308, you're
Sure.
still gonna have a good amount of energy at 800,000 yards, if that's important to you, depending on your terrain, depending where you live. Um, so that's another advantage, I would say. Just have some quick numbers here to share. For example, like a 308 Full Metal Jacket 150 grain, also known as M80 ball, at 500 yards, you're going to have around 1,000 foot-pounds of energy, depending on barrel length, plus or minus 100, 200 foot-pounds. But generally, you're going to be around 1,000 foot-pounds at 500 yards. That's pretty impressive. That's like a moderately powered 44 Magnum at point blank. So ton of
Right.
energy at long distance, which has its advantages for a variety of things: hunting, anti-material, penetration. I'll let you guys use your imagination what you would need that for. But what are your thoughts about that?
Oh, absolutely. The AR-10 has a better effective range. That being said, I've shot my AR-15s at 500 yards, and I've noticed that even the VMAX bullet doesn't necessarily have the in water jugs doesn't necessarily have the energy to expand. Even the 55 grain VMAX bullet, which I shot at a 500 and it was 500 yards even. The 55 VMAX bullet just would not expand in a big old laundry detergent jug full of water, and you'd think it would just break apart.
Right.
So yeah, the
Wow.
effective range
Wow.
of 5.56 bullets is 3 to 400 for energy dump. But you remember that's the 1,000 foot-pounds. Now, an AR-15 in general, you can throw other uppers on there like 458 SOCOM and get your 2,500 foot-pounds that you need at the muzzle, but you're not going to get it at distance with the 458 SOCOM. It's going to
Right.
drop like a lead rock because it
Right.
relies on a big bullet instead of a medium-sized bullet with speed like the 308 Winchester does. But you can
Right.
still get your 2,500 foot-pounds of energy. I've done a video on it with the Buffalo Board stuff, and it only takes an 18-inch barrel to get that, so it's not too far off as far as initial foot pounds, but the range where you can get foot
It
pounds
starts
is
to
up.
drop like
Yeah.
it's
But
like a
that being said,
4570 or some other
yeah,
big bore.
yeah, that being said, 6.5 Grendel, 6 Arc, 25-45 Sharps, they can all do a lot better on extending that. And that's why I think the military should have gone to something like that and slapped uppers on their lowers they already had and made it
Right.
cheaper for us taxpayers.
I know.
Um, but that being said, like those bullets still are not going to have the velocity to get that far because powder capacity is limited by the magazine well of the AR-15, and
Right.
so definitely have more energy to get out there farther.
Thanks for all that information. Another thing to consider, especially here in the eastern U.S., probably also for you in Alaska, vegetation deflection.
Yeah,
Um, generally speaking, a bigger bullet, heavier bullet especially, is going to have less deflection in dense vegetation than a small light bullet. And this was proven in the Vietnam War when
sure.
the Viet Cong were using AK-47s, Americans were using 5.56, and they had issues penetrating through foliage, and that's actually why they ended up inventing the specialty 12 gauge shotgun shells, the
Sure. Hmm.
with the darts in them. I don't know if
Yep.
you've
The
seen those.
flechettes. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
because they thought that would penetrate through the foliage better.
And
So
didn't necessarily,
vegetation
but yeah.
deflection. What do you think about that?
So vegetation deflection has more on the ogive of the bullet than it does the weight of the bullet. The weight of the bullet does help.
Hmm.
If you shoot it with a flat nose 45-70, it's just going to break the branch and go right through. Whereas
Right.
even if there's a sharp ogive on 30-06 300 Magnum,
Whatever.
308,
308.
whatever, if there's
Right.
a sharp ogive, it's still going to deflect some. It's not going
Right.
to deflect as much. Like you said, the smaller
Right.
bullets are there. So my answer to that would be for an AR-15, if you're in dense brush, you throw on a 458 SOCOM upper and you keep a couple of magazines with you. And then when you get out to more open area, you take cover, you switch your upper, if you're bugging out in an area where you're going to have deep woods, the AR-15 does have capabilities in other cartridges. 300 blackout even will deflect less than 300 Winchester or 308 Winchester, excuse me, will deflect less because it's going at a less speed with the
Slower,
same type of
right?
bullet. Yeah. So the less speed will help it deflect less. Well,
What about like 5.56 ammo besides 458 SOCOM that you think would be good for that? If you didn't want to switch your upper, maybe like a expandable flat nose, like a soft point of some kind, or
yeah, sometimes a soft point would be better because, well, it depends. Obviously, heavier bullets are better. They had a lot less deflection with the 77 grain open tip match when they went to that bullet. Was it the Mark 262 projectile or in 5.56? I'd have to remember the exact military designation. Um, but yeah, the 77 grain had a lot less deflection. However, it was shot in a lot less dense jungle. It was shot in Iraq instead of Vietnam. So,
right?
there's that to be considered. But there's glass and there's other things that are, deflecting of bullets. So yeah, I absolutely agree that you're going to get less deflection with a bigger bullet. But there are solutions for the AR-15.
Okay. And also, we have anti-material AR-10s. You're usually going to have heavier bullets, bigger bullets, so you're going to do more damage. If you're trying to, like you mentioned earlier, stop a car, vehicle, mechanical devices, whatever that mechanical device is, or walls, whatever you're trying to destroy or penetrate through, you're going to have a easier time with the AR-10s. And then you could also say more penetration potentially, simply because you're retaining more energy at distance.
Sure.
And so, especially at distance, you're going to have more penetration in general. And closer range, maybe less of a difference, but still that energy is going to assist with penetration. So depending
Sure.
on what you're shooting at, what kind of projectile, if you're using, AP or steel tip or whatever, that's obviously going to have a difference. You can't compare a soft point to, M885 or whatever, steel
Sure.
tip. But generally, more energy is going to give you more penetration, better sectional densities and things like that, better ballistics coefficient. What do you
I can't
think?
I can't argue with that. I mean, obviously you get more penetration with a bigger bullet. I mean, there's got to be the right mix of speed and mass of the bullet to get proper
Right,
penetration, especially against armored targets.
right,
As I've demonstrated on my channel, not even 300 Win Mag always makes it through a level 4 plate.
right, right.
Even with armor piercing bullets, it doesn't always make it through. And you've demonstrated the same thing. So, like, it's got to be the right balance. And for like hard target and penetration destruction, like, yeah, you're gonna get better out of a bigger bullet. And
Yeah,
then
just
this
to
is
be clear, I'm not talking about armor penetration. That would be
correct,
separate because armor
right?
penetration requires velocity and bullet construction, which is a whole nother
Correct.
animal.
Yeah, and you're not gonna. Let's just talk about armor penetration for a second. As a
Sure.
civilian, it's not gonna happen.
Right.
You're not able to access the types of bullets that are not made anymore for the military, really,
Yep.
to do it. Even M855A1, the steel tips, I shot them out of a 22-250, and I've shot several different brands of plates out of it, and the Bowtac Tactical twice, one of the cheapest level 4 plates you can get for 139 bucks, and it still stopped 22-250 with a military steel tip bullet.
Yep.
And so, 3 times I've shot it that same plate twice in 2 different videos with 3 shots, and it still stopped it at 3568 feet per second, and it stopped it at over 3600 feet per second.
It's
And so,
ridiculous.
you're not going to get that velocity from a 5.56 or a 308. I don't even think they'll get it from the new 7.62 by 51. I don't think it's going to stop level 4, go through level 4 body armor from a 14-inch barrel. Maybe an
No, and
18 or
and
22-inch barrel, yeah, maybe, but not a
but then
14.
you got to also think about, velocity, not velocity, but well, yeah, velocity, your distance.
Hmm.
It might penetrate. It might emphasize might penetrate at, let's say, 100 yards or 50 yards. But further out, the velocity is
Yeah.
going to drop off, and it's not going
Y-
to.
Yeah, it's not going to penetrate. Yeah, you're not going to AR-10 if you're worried about 87,000 IRS agents coming at your house with ATF backing them up, you're not going to penetrate level 4 body armor. I'm sorry,
No,
it's just
no.
not going to happen.
It's tough
Uh,
stuff. Even the cheap plates they're just tough. It's a
yeah,
tough.
I mean, I bought the LA police gear plates the other day for 119 bucks on sale,
Yep,
and they're just
they're
they're
tough.
pretty tough too.
Yeah,
It's just tough stuff, and you're not gonna penetrate it. And the best thing is to have some for yourself in a SHTF situation, not worry about penetrating it, because
right.
I mean, if my 300 Win Mag the other day in that video, you saw it, doesn't go through with a steel tipped 28-inch barrel at 3782 feet per second. 130 grain steel tipped M80A1 bullet going 3782 feet per second, going what, almost 800 feet per second faster than it does out of a 308. If that doesn't actually go through, now it would probably hurt the person, but if
Yeah,
that doesn't actually go through, you're not going to penetrate, you know, um, body armor with that. So, like, when we're talking penetration, we're talking for animals, we're talking for car
objects.
doors,
Yeah,
objects, cover,
buildings, cover.
buildings,
Yeah,
cover that the bad guys are using. Obviously, you don't want to shoot cover the good guys are using. So, yeah, we're talking cover, but let's just get clear: you're not going to penetrate body armor. Sorry, that was a tangent I just went off on.
no, I think that's a good point that you mentioned that, and I mean we could even go a little further with this. Really quickly, want to touch on AR-10 versus AR-15 versus armor in terms of um, the deformation on the backside of the plate.
Oh
What are
yes.
your thoughts? Do you think with AR-10 you're going to have more energy transfer? You may
Oh,
knock the wind out of someone, you may break a rib or whatever.
absolutely. It's not like, and even AK-47. If you want to throw this in here, like there are stories of people getting shot in Afghanistan. I found the videos on YouTube where they had a hole in their level 4 plate right in the center, and they kept going at the bad guy. Like it didn't even phase them. So if you're shooting armored bad guys that are coming to destroy you, then yeah, 308 is going to do more damage. I would step up to if I could find a good 210 grain full metal jacket, which I don't think exists. I would step up to a 338 Federal in the AR-10 for that.
That's a great idea. That would
Yeah,
also break down the plate faster because you got more, you
correct,
damage that plate, you got bigger bullets and stuff, and
correct.
so it'd break it down faster. Um, Another thing that I want to mention before I hand it off to you is, you can use NATO standard rounds, with AR-10, especially the
Hmm.
classical, 7.62 by 51.
Sure.
So because of that, you're still going to have good availability,
Hmm.
especially like 308 Winchester. I'm sure in Georgia. I
Hmm.
know here in where I'm at, everybody has 308. It's very popular for deer hunting.
Yeah,
So
I killed my first deer with a 308 Winchester. So
there you go. See, so you might be able to scavenge some 308 at a hunting cabin. You come across a hunting cabin in the woods. You open a drawer and you see a couple boxes of 308 there, and there you go.
yeah,
Uh,
it's still pretty common. Yes, 6.5 Creedmoor, like me being an idiot, building an AR-10 and 6.5 Creedmoor. 6.5 Creedmoor, not so much. But one of the things you were talking about earlier before we started this was when 5.56 ran out during the pandemic, you could still get 308 and 6.5 Creedmoor. I could still get
yes,
6.5 Creedmoor fairly easily. Like
yes,
5.56 ran out pretty quick up here,
yep,
and then 6.5 Creedmoor took a little bit longer, but then it did run out, and the first thing back after everything ran out was 308 Winchester.
that's right.
So,
Yep,
M80 ball in particular was one of the first things back, and then some Winchester expanding rounds and some few other things. And then now it's probably one of the more prolific. If I had a 308 Winchester, I would do nothing but 308 Winchester ammo tests for the rest of the summer because there's that much
yeah.
more than any other caliber. So,
Because I think the price may have something to do with it. Like if you want to buy in bulk, it's much cheaper to buy 5.56 in bulk. You can buy,
sure.
hundreds and hundreds of rounds versus 308, you drop, let's say, $200 on 308. That'll get you 200 rounds if it's M80 ball. If it's specialty hunting ammo, maybe 100, 150.
Maybe.
So I think
Yeah.
that kind of maybe dissuades people from dumping lots of money on 308 because they don't get as many rounds, for their buck.
Sure. And I guess that brings us into my segment, why the AR-15 is better. And
Okay, yeah,
one of the
yeah.
yeah, if that's a good transition point. Um, One of the reasons why it is better is, and why I would prefer it to have an SHTF is economics. Um, you can get a Palmetto State lower for $30. You can get, have it shipped to your FFL and legally transfer it, and you can build a decent gun that will work in most situations for 400 or 500 bucks. And is it perfect? No. Is it going to be something the special forces want to take to Afghanistan? No. Um, but is it something that's going to work for home defense and to keep people out? If there's people running, trucks onto your property during SHTF, is it going to work during that situation? Yes, it is. Then you can build a little bit better quality. So this is an arrow lower here with a JT Distributing double star kit on it, and it's much better quality than I would call PSA. And this is my M forgery that I go with. It is clear. All right. And this is one that stays in my corner for home defense. And I can definitely go with this. And this is still significantly less than an AR-10. AR-10s, the good AR-10s are starting at 1,000 to 1,500 bucks. And this at the time I built it was a $700-800 bill, and still got, way better, ballistics than with the 16-inch barrel than the 10 or the 14-inch barrels. So, but you could still absolutely build these cheap. So a good AR-10. Here's my latest build. This one probably cost me about 1,200, and it's an arrow. It's a Palmetto lower, an arrow upper, and handguard. A AR stoner barrel, a cheap barrel, but it's also, something that you can do on the AR-15 is you can put in, triggers that will help you shoot a little bit faster. They're not illegal full auto triggers, obviously, but you can put in other triggers and they will absolutely. You can spend the money on that, and you can't handle those triggers in the AR-10 with the recoil. So that brings me to the next thing: is the recoil sensitive. If you are recoil sensitive, my wife was like, when she first shot an AR-15, she was like, "Oh, it's so loud," and then when she felt it, she's like, "Oh, that's like a 22." And I had a brother who was recoil sensitive. He was only 6 years old. He shot my Mini 14 at 7 years old. Could have hunted with it in the state of Georgia at the time. And then, whereas 6.5 Creedmoor is not a bad kicking round, but it's a lot more kick than that. And I do think the AR-10 does a nice job of taking, and a lot of semi-automatic 308 type builds do a nice job of taking the recoil right out of it. So what
Yep.
do you think about that, the recoil?
Yeah, the recoil. Yeah, I would say for sure you're going to get, even with an AR-10, you're still going to get a lot more recoil, especially if you have a lighter one and you don't have a lot of stuff on it. Like if you have
Sure.
like a naked one with just iron sights or maybe a red dot, you're gonna, it's a lighter rifle. You're gonna get more kick. But yeah, and I want to also quickly mention the economy aspect.
Yeah,
Definitely
please do.
true. Uh, you know, Ammunition is going to be obviously more expensive with an AR-10. Anytime you go bigger bullets, bigger cartridges, it's going to be more expensive. You got more brass, more lead and copper, more powder, larger
Sure.
primers. That's all going to add up.
Yep.
And then the firearms is too as well. The components. I would say that you can work around that if you're a hand loader. Not everybody's a hand loader, but if you can develop some loads for SHTF, and
Sure.
then once you find some good loads, just mass produce them, like a hunting load and a tactical load, and just maybe 1 or 2 hunting loads, 1 or 2
Sure.
tactical loads, and then just mass produce them. That'll cut down on the cost. But that's if you're a hand loader, if you have the time. Not everybody has the time.
And the one thing
You have
about hand
kids.
loading that people don't mention is yeah, per round you save money. These 6.5 Creedmoor, for example, are about $2.50 each. They're Barnes LRX factory loads, maybe $2.40 each, 30
Right,
cents each at the current prices, I think. But I can hand load them for $1.27.
right.
But if I pay myself minimum wage for the amount of time it took me to hand load them, they're now $3 each. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
Yeah, it does take time.
the time aspect is not something people think of very much.
That's true. Yeah, yeah, that's true.
So, but no, I definitely agree there. That brings me into the next thing I had about the AR-10. And here's my AR-10 again. This is the PSA. Or no, excuse me, not the PSA. This is the Arrow Precision. It's a full arrow upper. It's a full arrow lower. And everything about it's an Arrow Precision. U.S. optics on top. 1:6 LPVO. Because I treat this one less like a precision gun and more like a battle rifle. So I got an LPVO on it. But it's a heavy barrel for a precision gun. This is my most heavy gun that I own. Even my bolt heavy barrels are not this heavy. This is
Wow.
13.5 pounds loaded with a loaded
That's
magazine.
heavy, man. Wow.
And it's heavy. And traditional AR-10s, now there's the new ones like the Ruger S-Bar and the POF Rogue. There's the new ones that, basically put an AR-15 receiver with a 308 bolt on top of an AR-10 lower, and they're a lot lighter, but they're not as robust. And the Ruger S-Bars had some problems, and you even have some case dents in your POF Rogue, you were saying. And
Yes.
so you have some issues, and this is unloaded. So this is heavy. I have to use two hands to grab this. This I can grab off the table with one hand. And I'm a big guy. I'm not a weak guy. I'm
Right.
way too big. But anyway, like this. Now, if I'm running out in the woods in Alaska, would I rather have this for power? Absolutely. But if I run into a grizzly bear with one of these, the same thing's going to happen as if I run into a grizzly bear with one of these. I'm going to aim for the head as most as I can and pull the trigger until he's down.
Right.
So, that's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do that whether it's the 5.56 or the 6.5 Creedmoor, or 308, which I plan on getting a 308 upper, or my 22-250. As you guys might know if you watch my channel, I have an AR-10 built into 22-250, and that's the other thing I want to talk about is the specialty rounds. But we'll talk about the weight difference first. What do you think about the weight difference?
Um, Definitely a consideration. If you're bugging out, having a light, 5-6 pound rifle is a no brainer. I mean, it might even be better to just take an AR-15, an AR pistol, in your bug out bag. If you can get one really light, it's even better than having a handgun.
Sure.
But yeah, definitely the weight is a factor. I mean, you can't deny that.
And it's not
I
just
have,
the weight of the
yeah,
gun, the weight of the rounds.
the weight
Like
of the
this
rounds.
this
Yep.
30 rounder here for the AR-15 with 62 grain bullets. This has 25 rounds with 127 grain bullets. So the bullets themselves are double the weight. The powder charge is about double the weight for 6.5 Creedmoor than it is 5.56, maybe a little bit more. The casing weighs significantly more. I don't know exactly how much more the casings weigh. So, and that depends on the brand of casings, the brand of powder, and the brand of bullet, of course,
Right.
obviously,
Right.
and type of bullet. But I can carry about 5 or 6 of these on me, and I'm a big guy. These I can carry probably 9 to 10.
Hmm.
If I want to put the pouches in there correctly.
Yep.
So the weight of the rounds is a big difference too. Um,
Yes. I'll
if
agree with you on that. And that actually another thing people don't factor in with the weight of the gun is when you have a fully loaded magazine that can add another pound or two, especially
Sure.
if you have like 20 rounds of 308. I mean,
Oh
a
yeah.
fully loaded 308 mag, it's like a brick, it's heavy, man.
Sure.
You could
So there are
you could knock
7,000.
someone out with that.
Yeah. Yeah. There are 7,000 grains in a pound. Being a hand loader,
Yep.
and so if you want to know how many rounds you can load by a pound of powder, you divide how many your powder charge
Charge
by
weight.
7,000 by your charge
Right.
weight, and you get how many rounds you can load. And that's the other thing is you can do 300 to 350 with a pound of powder, maybe 290, 275 with a pound of powder, all the way up to 350 for 5.56. You're lucky to get 175 with 308.
Yep.
Really lucky to get 175.
Yep.
And especially if you're maxing out your powder charges and coming close to max and that kind of thing.
Yep. Yep.
So you can actually, powder itself is a lot cheaper for the hand loader if you're going to hand load a bunch
Yes.
of rounds up.
Yeah, you're
Then the
gonna burn up
bullets
more powder.
are
Yep.
less expensive. So all the weight and the all the economics of hand loading, you're going to do a lot better economically with the 5.56. But if
I
you're
agree.
me in Alaska, and a grizzly bear or a moose is about to stomp you or slice your face off and eat you as a grizzly bear, it's cheaper to shoot 308 at that time than it is to have a bear mauling. So,
Yeah,
just saying.
hospital bills. Yeah.
Hospital bills, or you don't live through it, and there's funeral
Plastic
bills for your
surgery.
family. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
and I'm ugly. There's no amount of plastic surgery that can help me. So they're gonna keep doing that the rest of my life. So
Yeah, I will say though, like with the whole argument about carrying more, I mean, you could spend the whole separate video talking about that, but I would
sure,
say that you may not need as many rounds with a larger caliber projectile. You're not going to need 2 or 3 rounds of 308 to put a threat down. I
sure,
mean, so that's something to consider. But yeah, it is true. What you say. I'm not going to deny that there. So physical fitness is another thing. If you're physically fit, relatively young, and you don't mind carrying the extra weight, it's a trade-off like anything else. You get more
sure.
power, more energy, but it's heavier. So you got to factor that in. Do you need that? Are you physically fit for that? What's your mission? Do you even need that many rounds? If you're just patrolling your property, let's say 300 yards around your house, do you really need 500 rounds on your person at all times? No, because you could go to your house and resupply. If you're going
You
on a
hope.
long range patrol where you're hiking 5, 10, 20 miles in the wilderness, over rough terrain, the weight is a huge difference, and
Sure,
every pound can make a massive difference in that situation.
absolutely.
So I would say, depending on the mission, what you're trying to do, in my opinion, I think you have to see for yourself, what makes sense. But
Totally agree. So, and my last just pro to the AR-15 is just how prolific it is. Um, parts compatibility. This is a negative for the AR-10 because not all AR-10s are compatible with each other. The Armalite had old M1A magazines that the old Armalite did, and like the DPMS and the Armalite style lowers at one point didn't fit together. I don't know if they've changed them now. The Knight's Armament, which is the SR-25, and the DPMS and the Arrow are all the same. But I don't know any other companies. I know there are other companies out there that are the same. I think PSA also fits on there. But like, when you get to 308 and all those compatibilities, you can't do that. Whereas AR-15s, you can throw pretty much any upper on any lower and it'll work. There's parts compatibility. There's much more many parts out there prolifically in support for the AR-15. And that means there's also like, I live near a military base. There's going to be more mags laying on the ground. If the Russian zombies parachute over, um, there's going to be more mags laying on the ground, which I don't think is likely. But um, you never know. They still have 8 times more soldiers than the
then
war
we
they're
do.
fighting. Right? Yeah, but
Another thing to mention about that too is law enforcement agencies. Now it's very common. Almost every law enforcement, right down from, your big city cops down to your local sheriff, they usually have a patrol rifle, which is 5.56.
absolutely,
Almost every deputy sheriff. So that's another area where you could potentially scavenge ammo and mags from, parts, whatever, especially if you have a buddy that's a cop.
absolutely. So I mean, there's all sorts of proliferation for the AR-15. I mean, we know there's like tens of millions of AR-15s. That's why they can never ban it in this country, and nobody's going to turn them in. So might as well have one. I think for SHTF, if I can kind of conclude this way, um, and it's because I have this. I think having one of each, is very appropriate. Maybe even two of each for spare
Yep.
parts and a spare rifle, and then having spare parts for those guns. And the reason why I say that having one of each is probably the obviously best thing. Now, obviously, that's expensive, very expensive. My AR-10 here and my more expensive AR-15s. I've got easily $4,000 into these, but I built them piecemeal over time.
Right.
Got a part here, got a part there, and when I eventually got it all together, they were ready to go. Um, so I think having both is a big deal, and the reason why I say that is there are times where both are appropriate. Um,
Yes.
for general home defense, the AR-15 is going to be better because you're gonna have to change your ammo to not over penetrate your bad guy and the walls in 308. Like that's just, you're gonna have to do it. Like the ammo video I put out today on the 125 grain Accubon going 3,100 feet per second in the Springfield M1A. That one was, that's a good round for home defense because I don't think it would over penetrate a bad guy, and if it did, it would lose a lot of energy in the process. And same thing with the 110 grain I put out a few weeks ago, or yeah, 2 weeks ago now. Those bullets, but a 150 grain, especially talking, you got M80 ball in there, or Barnes TTSX, or even Hornady Interlock, soft points. Like they're still gonna come out an intruder in your house.
They're
So
still going to penetrate
yeah,
almost as much as a 45-70 will. I've
sure.
done tests.
Yeah, and so like your AR-15 is much more appropriate for your home defense. And
Yep.
I'm going to say it right now, the AR-15 is the best home defense weapon in America. Better than a shotgun because there's less recoil, better lights, better sights, and more rounds than a
Yep.
shotgun. So it's better for that reason. Is it more powerful? No. But is it better for defense? Yeah, probably. Um, and it's more survivable than a shotgun for the bad guy because you don't actually want to kill somebody.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and we all talk about having to put that person down, but like if you don't actually want to kill them, it's more survivable. It's not great, but it's still, holes in you or holes in you. They're still bad. But like it's more of that. So you have that, but then for patrolling around here in Alaska, the AR-10 is going to make a lot more sense. And then for material like you said, car material, car doors, stopping, shooting the concrete out of a pillbox, good luck with that. Like it's 308 is going to make a lot more sense.
Right.
And
Right.
so your AR-10 is going to make a lot more sense. Moose hunting, like there are people there. There are stories from the villages here in Alaska. People using AR-15s and Mini 14s and Mini 30s, intermediate cartridges for caribou hunting, and they do just fine. They buy whatever cheap ammo they have. It's what they have, and they use it, and they kill caribou and moose with it. And I've killed 6 deer with a white-tailed deer with an AR-15, a 20-inch barrel. Put them all right there with a 55 grain VMAX. Very accurate rifle, and
Next
brainstem
shot.
shots. Yeah,
A brainstem. Yep.
yeah, back of the brainstem shot, and they did one thing, down. So you definitely can, make the right shots with an AR-15, but the more power is helpful. Well, we already talked about recoil. Like for a woman, like the AR-15 is almost perfect. When my wife shot the AR-15, she loved it, fell in love with it. So I definitely think that for a woman, like the AR-15 is a much, much better platform and than the AR-10.
Less blast, less recoil, lighter
Correct. Yep.
ammo. It's just less intimidating. So
Hmm.
I agree with you on that.
Yep.
So do you have
Absolutely.
anything else you want to add, or
No, thanks for having me on, and thanks for let's talking this through.
for those of you guys who don't know Alaskan Ballistics, check him out. If you like what you see, subscribe. I'm sure you will like it. He's got a lot of ballistic stuff, a lot of 5.56 stuff. I mean, you do a variety. You want to just quickly mention what would you say you specialize in mostly on your channel?
10 millimeter. But like, yeah, no, I specialize in try to get everything that, everything bear protection, I guess 4570, 458 SOCOM, we're starting to specialize in a little bit. Bear protection rounds. That's what is it good for hunting type rounds, hunting rifle rounds. And then I've done quite a bit of armor penetration,
Yes, a
or
lot of
attempted
armor
penetration.
penetration. Yep.
Attempt armor penetration. I'm trying to purposely, all copper solid bullets out of a 7 mag and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm trying to penetrate the armor, and that's why I'm saying you're not going to do it. And earlier in the video, um, but yeah, I definitely think that it's 10 millimeters what I do the most, but also I do lots of rifle rounds and hunting rounds, anything I can get a hold of.
And a lot of AR stuff. You do a ton of AR stuff.
Yeah, I did in the past. I need to do some more.
So check his channel out. He's got, I don't know, hundreds, probably thousands of videos. I'm sure. But that's pretty much it. Thank you guys so much, and see you on the next one. Take care.